afternoon or good morning for most of you, and welcome to our continuing webinar series and today's series that continues on leadership areas. And today we're going to specifically talk about informing and educating legislators about adult education, which is a very important component of the work we do to continue to do the work around advocacy and support of the adult education system in our states and across the nation. So thank you again for joining us today. And so with me, our colleagues today are Sharon Bonney, the Executive Director of COABE, and myself, Reese Stagnolia. I'm the Chair of the National Council of State Directors of Adult Education. And along with me is our new policy chair of the National Council of State Directors Association, Alex Harris. And we have Polly Smith. Polly is the chair of the COABE policy group. And then we also have Pat Tyler, who is the executive director of the National Council of State Directors of Adult Education. And we have Kay Charbonneau, who is the president of COABE, and Regina Soot, who is the student engagement chair of COABE. Welcome, Regina. And Kristen Hempel, the associate director of adult education at East Con Willimantic, Connecticut. And then finally, to wrap up our group of participants, Jean Sofer, who is the director of government relations, working with both COABE and the National Council of State Directors group. So again, thank you for your participation today, and we'll hope you'll find that we provide some tools and resources that will be valuable to you as adult educators across the country as we work to provide a greater degree of advocacy of our work. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Selena with full capacity marketing.
Hi, thanks so much, Reese, and welcome to everyone on the webinar today. We have a very exciting lineup of great speakers, and don't worry, not everyone in that previous slide is going to speak because I think we would be here for a week, but they certainly contributed content to this very robust webinar that we're going to share with you today. Some of my team members at Full Capacity Marketing are on, and just to get us started, to know that you're in a listen-only mode, and so to chat with us, you want to use that chat feature or ask any questions. You can type in the question pod or just raise your hand and let us know that you're present. In fact, if you wouldn't mind typing in right now in the question pod the state you're from and the number of people that are in your room, just so we have a sense of our crowd here today. And Marianne and Sharon both, Marianne from my team and Sharon from COABE, are going to be monitoring the chat room. So they'll probably be sending you links and things as I talk about them. And we're just going to share a lot of resources and energy today on this super important topic. I wanted to sort of back up, though, before we dive into the topic and talk about the top 5 reasons to participate in this national campaign that really shares a collective voice in helping to save our funding for adult education, but also inform educators about the relevancy of your important work in adult education. The first reason is to assess tools to build your organization's brand. The team here has really assembled a fantastic toolkit for all of you, and we know that in adult education organizations in particular, the resources are slim, and so these tools are going to help you. We've pretty much mapped everything out for you. We have programs that are great in our local community that help a lot of our local workers and adult learners, and then you go in and you talk about the success story. So that is a place in there to insert a success story about someone that you have worked with in your adult programs. Make sure that that story lands on the national campaign website, and there's a form to submit that on the campaign website. And then you talk about learning more about how adult education elevates career and college readiness. You thank them for the time, and then on the back side of that is our data points, are the data points. Now, this is an infographic that we created from the national level. You can certainly take this and other data points, which Polly and Reese are going to share with you today on how to tailor these types of data points for your local area. So all of this is editable again. Now the other thing that we've added in your toolkit, which is very cool because you can get your students and your family involved, is an editable postcard. So you can have a message, same thing, making an ask to support adult education funding. And you could take these and have them in class with students as an adult educator, share the campaign with them and have them sign it, and then you can mail a whole bunch to your local, state, and federal officials, whoever you're targeting. You can also share these completed postcards with family members and friends. So the idea here is that as you as an adult educator, you're going out and you're sharing this campaign and the importance of your work and funding with your family, your friends, and your students. All of that. And so can you imagine now your local, state, and federal officials getting hundreds and thousands of these postcards and support letters and doing proclamations all over the country? That's where the power of numbers come in the 55,000. Okay, I'm going to share with you now a couple of really fantastic tools that COABE has developed. So give me just a second here. Okay. Here's one of the tools here. And what I love about this, we call it an email quickfire, because every one of you can access this today. And as you see, you go through this website and it'll say, hey, invest in adult education. And you scroll down a little further, and here is an automatic email that you can send. And this is for teachers, administrators, and friends of adult ed. And here's one for students as well. So if I click on this button because I want to take action, and you can see I've already filled out my form. I'm going to increase my screen size just a little bit so you can see it. It'll say, hey, fill out this form below. And I've already been here before, but I've got my address and information in. And then all I do is click submit. Now, what's great about this is it gives the recipients already based on my zip code. So it'll give me at the federal level, I'm going to send it to the Vice President, Mike Pence. And at the Senate level, my representatives are Feinstein and Harris, and at the House Representatives is Darrell Issa. So based on my zip code, it automatically comes up. So I can take note of that. If I go back and say, hey, I'm going to build my database and who do I need to reach out to from a federal or state perspective, it automatically gives you that. And then here's our standard message, and it just says, I stand with the 55,000 adult educator leaders. Here's the ask, which is we urge Congress to, fund at the $649 million level. And then let's educate and elevate, right, to improve opportunities for all Americans. Then we have links here. See why adult education funding supports business, the economy, and adult learners. And it's got links to our video, our fact sheet, and our success stories. Now, you can edit this message however you like. You can have a message subject here, and the students can also have a similar message but also add in what's important for them in terms of how adult education has supported their lives. Okay, so that's one really awesome tool. The other, go here, is this nifty little tool here, and this is for the national campaign going on, the federal outreach, the federal official outreach going on the end of September, and this allows us to track legislative meetings. So you can see I've put my name in here, and then I'm going to proceed, and it says search for the elected official you've met with or select a state. So I can come in here and input the information, and it helps you track actually your meetings, your legislative meetings. And this is important as we roll through this because we want to be able to share information in terms of what happened in that particular briefing. And so it'll be really great to do that. The other thing here is that I just wanted to share with you, where are these tools located? If you go to the Educate and Elevate website and you go to the Campaign Toolkit and scroll down, you'll see all of them there, and you see our list is really growing. The other thing is we have all the tools posted on the Learning Forum as well, which we'll get to at the end. Okay, let me go back here. Gone over that. Lastly, before I toss it over to Polly and Reese, the campaign is really built on 3 key strategies. Qualitative stories and secondly, qualitative innovations, and then the data piece. So I can't underscore how important success stories are in this type of campaign. In our first webinar, we shared with you the power of storytelling, and there's a wonderful video that actually breaks down the psychology of storytelling, what is a good storytelling, and why it's so critical. And they've done research and data that shows what happens in the brain when you tell a great story. There's a video in the Learning Forum that you can pull down, very quick, 3-4 minute video that explains that chemistry. This campaign is changing not only the hearts and minds of people about adult education, but it's also about changing their chemistry, changing their brain chemistry to say, wow, this is really important. I'm going to fund it. I understand the importance of it. And so to do that, we need an arsenal of success stories. As we said, our goal is 55,000 stories for 55,000 educators. The other thing is your innovations is a place on the website to submit those. And thirdly, really important, is quantitative data. How do we then take data either from a national perspective and make it relevant in our briefings with legislators? And that's where we're bringing in 2 experts today. And I'm going to turn it over to Polly to start us off with that. Thank you, Polly.
Thank you, Selena. Good morning, everyone. So incorporating data points in our stories is critical for those folks who are interested in what's in it for me and why invest. So we need the data, and we need the data to be clear and understandable. In the legislator key facts, which is in the toolkit that Selena just showed us, gives us great data at the national level about the need for adult education, the challenges it creates for our country and our communities, and the results that we get when adults participate in adult education programs. This is great for our national and our federal legislators, but when we're talking to our state and local legislators, we need to make the data relevant to our state and to our community. For example, in Alaska, 17% of the people who work here do not live here. And that's data that comes from the Department of Labor in the state of Alaska. Your Department of Labor will have many data points. So will the American Survey, which is a part of the census, data that's gathered and updated regularly. And I find that the school districts give me lots of information about the number of people who leave high school who are not at grade level, the number of high school graduates that are completing their education and those who aren't. Those are all really critical data points that address the need and what the challenge, how that affects your community. And that's where our local knowledge will become really important. Then the results for our local is basically what we're doing in our programs, how we're telling our success stories. Okay, Reese, I'd like to pass it on to Reese, who will show you what some of the folks have done to make it local.
Thanks, Polly. Well, I'm certainly a strong advocate for the importance of using data to tell our story. I think sometimes and we do a great job as a system of telling those personal stories. But I think we also have to think about who our audience is, and also understand the need and the importance of providing our story in sort of a data-driven or data-informed manner as well. So one of the things that we've done in Kentucky is develop this what we call an adult education profile that just has in an infographic front and back 2-pager that just provides a lot of information to those policymakers, decision makers, funders to understand the importance of adult education and what use those in terms of what resonates with that audience today is, how do we create a world-class talent pipeline, and understanding that education is an economic catalyst. And so to do that, we've got to move from what I like to say is move from the anecdotal to the factual and present our case as if you were an attorney presenting your case on the importance of adult education in a real factual way that our policymakers and funders can embrace and understand. For example, as you see here in our profile, we note that oftentimes in state budgets, state funds are focused in if you look at it as a budget pie, they're divided in 3 big pots of funds at most state level, and they go to education. A lot of funds in states go to Medicaid. That's a growing slice of the budget pie, and to Department of Corrections over those. So I like to say a lot of our budget pies, we educate, medicate, and incarcerate. And we have to think more of how do we provide a compelling story and message so that more of our funds will go towards the educate side. So to do that, to begin talking about it in terms of the economy, and education and the economy, I heard someone say, are so intrinsically linked. They use the term educonomy, and I think that's very appropriate for our thinking as we think of how do we transform this adult education system of ours to support the new Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. So there are a lot of data and statistics and points out there that we could maybe have another webinar to talk about, but we know that, for example, 99% of the jobs created during the recovery have gone to those with some form of post-secondary education and training. I like to say here in Kentucky, the GED is simply not enough. And so that's not to say that we need to transition more folks into baccalaureate programs, but essentially to certificate programs or credentials, occupational credentials. So when we talk about in here the statistics around, as we're on the fact sheet that Polly showed, 65% of all jobs in 2020 will require some level of post-secondary education. The operative word there is some. As I said, it's not a baccalaureate degree, not even an associate degree necessarily, but some occupational skills and training, I think, are critically important. And some would say that by 2025, that is going to increase to 80% of jobs are going to require some post-secondary education and training. We know those with low academic skills and the individuals we often serve, when the economy turns down, they're the first out. And on the other hand, when the economy starts to rebound, they're the last back in. So, we've got to figure out ways that we can advocate for our system from the vantage point of its impact on the economy. And data is a terrific way to tell our story in a factual way. So with that, I will turn it over to Regina.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for inviting me here today to share some of what I've learned over the years holding briefings with legislators. I'm going to turn my camera off anyway, so we can look at the slides, so I can do that. So there are tried and true strategies for good meetings, along with a bit of art and professional wisdom. No 2 briefings are ever the same. I have found that there's 3 critical elements, and they're in no particular order, but without all 3, your advocacy efforts or your visits may not be as successful. So first up is story, and we've talked a little bit about that. You need to develop stories to describe to others what adult education is and what it does. It is oftentimes unknown or confusing to people. Stories are definitely best from students, but there's also ways to take student stories on the road. You can listen to stories, watch a story, read a story, and leave behind a story. Teachers have lots of stories. They can tell the story of adult ed and the transformation that happens in a very convincing way. Business and community leaders also have stories to tell, and COABE is collecting all of these stories so that you have a bank of them at your fingertips. Stories should be representative of your data. Don't think you have to find the one student who became the U.S. Surgeon General to make your story compelling. Stories need to be authentic, and you should either match your data to the story or connect in some way so that your legislator really understands how the story and the data are connected. You can't have one without the other. I feel that relationship is really important as well. You want to develop relationships during your meetings or your briefings. No one wants to be in a one-way relationship, they're two-way. So if you want your legislator to care about adult ed, you need to connect it to them or to things they care about. They care about their state, they care about their economy, they care about crime and healthcare. Find out what they care about and then begin your relationship around that. You can't give a legislator a lecture about adult ed, show them a glossy data sheet, tell them how important it is, tug at their heartstrings, hand them a tissue, invite them to graduation, and also ask them to increase funding in your very first meeting. Build a long-term strategy. Plan on how you're going to engage them the next time. Make it more than one time. You've already heard today from others how making the case for investing in adult education, how to do it using meaningful data. Data is critical. You can't just have story, as Reese said, without the data. Make sure you keep your data up to date and relevant. And if you're not sure, use the COABE resources. That's what the toolkit is for. So you've got your data, you've got your story, and you're ready to build a relationship. So now is the time for the briefing. You may consider starting local, then state, and finally federal. The meetings are all really similar, and they don't need to really differ, but it could be a way to reduce your nerves so that you're not nervous. Start with your neighbors. They can also become allies later. Make sure you plan before the visit. Research and take a little bit of time. Don't worry if you don't get to meet with the legislator. Meet with the assistant and the aide. Sometimes they're just as good, if not better. They are the ones that really have the ear of your legislator. If you can hold briefings with staff in district or in DC, you know, that's great. But if not, invite them into your programs. Sometimes when I meet with somebody the first time, it's just one-on-one. I want to give kind of a feeling of, you know, what their issues are and how they react to adult basic ed information. I really don't ever want to put people in an uncomfortable situation where we have 5 or 6, you know, adult ed advocates or students or teachers with a legislator that might not be open to listening. Before the visit, make sure you learn about your legislator, learn about their issues. If you take others, you're kind of like the matchmaker. You want to make sure the date goes well. If the legislator has a background in farming, take a student that connects to that. Know what questions they may have by reviewing their posts and their blogs. See what sorts of things come up on their social media feeds. Do your research and have students do research as a classroom activity as well. Just before the meeting, make sure everybody knows what the purpose is. Don't try to convey too much. You most likely will only have 20 minutes, maybe 30. So what do you want them to remember? If many of you are going to be at the meeting, make sure you assign roles because you don't want to waste time speaking over each other or having kind of like empty gaps with no one talking. If you have students, give them a lead role and make sure they tell their stories. I'm going to go through a few do's and don'ts for a good meeting. We kind of developed these over the years with students in mind, but honestly, anybody meeting with a policymaker or their staff should consider these tips too. So I'm not going to read all of them, but there's a balance. There's a balance to telling a compelling story. Tell the story with personal and with data. Data should match the story you're focusing on. If I get the job, I'll contribute more to the economy. I'm the mom of 3 and I want to be a good role model. Or I'm a nurse now and it all began with getting my GED. Connect the data to those statements. Good data is something that you get by making sure your program is doing its best to help students. You get good data by supporting teachers. If the quality of the adult ed program is in question, data won't help, story won't help. If your data is wrong, that doesn't help either. Good stories are authentic and honest. Don't try to exaggerate or stretch the truth. Your student stories don't have to make it into the movies. Keep the message pertinent, positive, and attention-grabbing without bringing everyone down. If everyone is trying to get attention with end-of-the-world messages, don't cut, you know, and there's a lot of those messages going on right now, it's easy to ignore them all because no one policymaker feels like they can win anything that big. Depressed advocates don't help. Be ready for questions, and if you don't know the answers, tell them you'll get back to them. You can always concentrate on the need for adult education if you get stuck. Talk about how adult ed transforms lives. Tell them how working in adult ed has transformed you. I've never met a more passionate group of advocates than adult educators because they are the ones on the ground and they see how ABE transforms lives. Make sure to tell that story too. And make sure to check out the resources on this webinar. There's some really good slides, some tips, some strategies. It's gonna help you be more prepared and less nervous. Anyone can do this. So check those out. I'm gonna pass it back now to Selena, and she's gonna talk about a really important briefing that we've had. Thanks.
Well, that was just terrific, Regina. Thank you so much. And, you know, one of the things I heard you speak, just to make some connection points, one of the most powerful points you made was that this is a long-term strategy. It's not about a one and done where you go in and say, don't cut. It's about building a relationship. So it's moving from a transactional relationship to a transformational one. And all research shows that to build that transformational relationship with a legislator or anyone is that we need to increase our interaction. So I like the points of following them on social media, and we're going to have a whole webinar on how to leverage social media for this campaign and your local brand, but sending them pertinent information or reports and staying in touch with them, that's just so critical. And so now what we're going to do is sort of tie it all together because the COABE team had a fantastic briefing with DeVos, Secretary DeVos, so it'll be very interesting to see what actually happened in that briefing. And Sharon, I think I'm going to toss it to you and Reese and maybe Pat and talk about that.
Excellent. So thank you, Selena. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
You can hear it? Okay, great. Thank you. So it was our pleasure to meet with Secretary DeVos in September. We did this in collaboration with the state directors, and it was a wonderful meeting. We met with her for almost an hour, and we talked with her about the many issues that we felt were sort of flagging adult education and tried to see if she was interested in supporting the cause. And Reese and Pat, would you like to talk a bit about that?
Sure. You know, it was really an unprecedented opportunity, and really thank our partners at COABE for convening this opportunity. And as Sharon said, we spent nearly an hour with the secretary and, excuse me, her chief of staff. And I thought she, you know, this was at the end of a long day. Her time had gotten rescheduled. So we didn't meet with her until probably 6 to 7 p.m. But she still was very attentive and listening to what we had to say and sort of what I think we characterize as an adult education 101. Just to talk about and sort of connect the dots maybe for her of understanding the importance of adult education, particularly as an economic catalyst and its impact there, and to understand that as we work collectively across the nation, that we're an adult education system, and oftentimes we think of adult education as grants and projects, but grants and projects come and go, And I think we need to think of how we think more of ourselves as an adult education system that's making a significant impact on the economy across the nation. So I felt it was a very productive meeting and a great opportunity to spend nearly an hour with her and her chief of staff to understand the adult education challenge we have in the nation and connecting it to the other work that she does.
That's great. And she also did agree to visit with an adult ed program or school during adult ed and family literacy weeks. We're excited about that. And she just seemed extremely supportive. We left that meeting very excited and very hopeful about having her continued support in the future as well. And so I just wanted to see, Pat, did you want to say anything before we pass it back to Selena? Okay. Selena, we're passing it back to you. Thank you.
I think Pat is speaking. I see her speaking, but she's on mute. So Pat, if you could unmute and then we can hear you. Thank you so much.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I think as Reese and Sharon pointed out, the important thing for us was to educate. We went to visit with Secretary DeVos with the idea of letting her know what adult education is today. And one of our PR issues, if you will, in adult education is moving people away from the notion that it's just literacy work for low literate individuals or that it's just GED. So I think that was an important piece of our education that we wanted to impart to the Secretary. And I would just echo what Regina and Reese have already brought up in the meeting. I think anytime you're meeting with an official, it's important to do a little bit of homework and understand what their interests and their priorities are. And the fact sheets and the personal stories are wonderful. Sometimes you just have a minute and it's important to have some fast facts in your mind about your population and the outcomes that you can achieve. And they should be ready for you to share with anyone that you come in contact with. And I think we all, in meeting with Secretary DeVos, had those facts. So it was a very positive meeting, and I was very pleased that she was very interested in visiting some of the programs.
Thank you, Pat and Sharon and Reese. I have a couple of questions actually on the briefing. I know it was late at night, you said, and you had very little time with her. Was there any certain angle that you took with her, given that the White House administration is very sort of pro-business and pro-economy? Were there any sort of key points that you shared, given that she was your target audience at that time around those particular issues?
So Selena, we had an hour with her. She took almost an hour with us, even though it was so late in the day. And she really was interested in talking about innovation and technology. And she also was very interested in the angle of working with business. And Reese had some great statistics and a really great quote. I don't know, Reese, if you'd like to share that, but I thought it went really well because we did have a lot of data that supported our discussion. So Reese, did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. We talked about, where there's skills progression, there's wage progression. And I think the more we can, link it to the economy and talked about the fact that, understanding that, oftentimes we have this misperception that jobs are lost to foreign competition, but, for every job lost to foreign competition, 5 are lost to automation. So we've got to prepare our students to be able to succeed in sort of this digital and automated economy. So those were some of the important things to share. But also we talked about, I mentioned the importance of linking as far as it relates to maybe entitlement reform, to think about how do we link benefits received to education pursued. And so often we find that students in our programs essentially say, why bother? Why should I pursue a high school equivalency when all it's going to lead to is an entry-level wage job? And when I can not work and stay home and earn the equivalent of $24 an hour, because they're adept at calculating with child care and Medicaid and food stamps. And so you can see from the perspective of a single mom with multiple kids, why they would not choose to participate in our programs, for a very rational reason of the importance of supporting their children. So we've got to figure out strategies on entitlement reform that looks at on sort of a sliding scale, so that if you do pursue education, you do obtain a GED, and that you just really don't drop off the cliff in terms of the benefits received. So I think there has to be some further discussion about that issue. And I was actually in that with our state workforce board and Medicaid leaders earlier this morning about this very issue.
Well, that's just outstanding, and you can see how well thought out that strategy is, knowing your target audience, knowing her key issues and what they are, going in and being able to have that data behind you really elevates the face of adult education. So thank you for sharing that. It's just outstanding. Before we get into wrap-up steps, I'm going to ask Sharon and Marianne if we have any questions or comments, and then we can talk about your calls to action and how to access different tools. So anything there, Marianne or Sharon?
I'm just looking, I'm sorry, Selena, we're just looking through. I mean, the comments have been really supportive and positive.
I think I was texting with Marianne, and she had said something about, is there a way to track or coordinate efforts local or statewide, and what about duplication of effort? Sharon, I know you responded on the text or the text chain on that, but maybe just share it with the audience.
Sure. So yes, there is a way to track that through our system. It would just involve that we need to know from the locals or the state levels if they're coordinating legislative visits. But we can certainly go and pull a report and see which visits have been scheduled, and if they're duplicative. So if there's 3 people, say from Florida, going in to see the same legislator, if we'd want to know that, we could very easily pull that information.
That's fantastic. I'm going to go to this one slide here, because we're going to talk about some of the additional webinars that we're going to. I've already talked about the special event. But you see here, there is going to be on August 18th, a webinar specifically for mobilizing your state for Educate and Elevate. So as we're doing all this planning, we're going to meet with the state directors to see how they might want to mobilize all the adult educators within their state and maybe tailor the campaign. So there are a lot of tools that COABE has in terms of tracking. And to me, it's not only tracking, but it's what knowledge did you gain from that briefing? Like, we just learned so much from the 3 of you about that briefing with DeVos, right? So how do we share that so that we can make the next briefing better or relevant to whatever's coming out in the news? So it's sort of like collecting that data through these briefings. Those are very powerful. That's almost like a focus group, if you will. How do we take that and then learn from each other, and then also look at trends, because that's going to help us tailor our messaging. So there's a webinar planned for that, and we'll probably even do a little tutorial on that tool, on how you track and look at all that information, just so that people understand the tool. It's very, very intuitive. The other thing we're going to dive into is social media strategies, and Marianne Conlon's going to lead this webinar, and she's absolutely outstanding in social media. We call her our social media and technology guru for a reason. And we're just going to really, there's so much you can cover in social media, but we're really going to hone in on how do you use it to advance your mission with legislators and your community. And then we'll also do one, we've talked, Reese, we put coming soon. Reese, we're going to put you on the line for that data webinar, because you're just a wealth of information there. Just in terms of calls to action, it's a lot of information. So we encourage you to download and review all of the recorded webinars that we have, because each one tackles a subject very deeply. So let's say if the one thing you want to do is send out a press release or do something with your local media, fantastic. Go in and review that webinar and all the materials. And then if you need technical assistance, you can ask your question in the learning forum, which I'll go to in just a second here. And then again, we're wanting 55,000 stories, and you think, wow, 55,000, that's not a lot, because it just requires each of us as in adult education to submit one. So the other benefit for submitting those stories is as we push legislators to the website, they see your organization and your name in lights. So make sure that you're doing that as well. And then let me just go right now to the learning forum. I'll give you a snapshot. Here it is right here. And so just give me a moment. And Sharon, as I'm doing this, if there are any questions, we can certainly answer those as well.
Hi, Selena, I don't see any other questions here.
Okay.
But I did want to mention that that webinar you mentioned on the 18th, that's actually for state directors and state association leaders.
Ah, thank you for that. Thank you very much for that. Okay. So Sharon, what is the URL of your learning forum? And I'll type it in real quick here.
The learning forum for
yeah. Oh, here, I can do it on sorry, I had it all pulled up and then it disappeared on me. So I wanted to show them the learning forum. Just had it on the other slide there. There we go. I'll Google you. You come right up there. Okay, here's the learning forum, and you've got the URL on your PowerPoint when you get it. You'll see here on the left, we've created feeds, and you go to the National Public Awareness Campaign. So what we do after every webinar is we take certain materials and we'll post them up, whether they're the webinar PowerPoint or things that we want you to look at more deeply. For example, in the media webinar, we had review this example of this op-ed. There's a powerful video on collective storytelling. This is where you can post threads and say, hey, you know, I've downloaded this, but I'm not tracking totally with the information. Here's what I'm thinking of doing. I have a question. Just post it up, and one of us will get back to you just in terms of your questions. So this is the learning forum, and it's a great way to, you know, get your questions answered. And thank you, Sharon, for making that all happen for us. Okay, so let's go here then. If we don't have any questions, I'm going to just scroll down here to the, we've covered the webinars. We've got the learning forum covered. So I think we're pretty set. Here's your address for the learning forum here. And then if you have any questions, you know, go there and make sure you input your questions. So in the last couple minutes, I'm going to turn it over to Sharon to close out. I want to thank everyone as well for their participation today.
Thank you so much, Selena. I would just like to read something that Tom Nash, who's our current past president and was also an attendee at the meeting with Secretary DeVos, has noted here, because I think it's great. Tom says, as Reese noted, our meeting with Secretary DeVos meant to educate her about who we are and how we can contribute to a vibrant workforce and the quality of life for Americans. It's really about making connections, relationships, building, and planting seeds of knowledge. And I also wanted to mention that Tom was a great contributor in that meeting, as well as Kay Charbonneau, who is our current president. So thank you, everybody, for participating. All of the tools that you've seen here in this webinar will be a part of the e-blast that comes to you tomorrow at 3 o'clock Eastern Standard. Everybody on this webinar will also receive a certificate of attendance. As well, this has been being recorded and it will be shared on our website. So all this information will be right at your fingertips. And I guess our one ask as we head out today is please let everybody else know. Share this information with your state association, share it with your friends and colleagues. Let them know that we are working really hard to move this campaign forward on behalf of adult education as we invest in America's future. And so with that, on behalf of everybody here, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to join us, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar next week. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye now.